Hi, Holly family. Welcome back. I hope you listened to and enjoyed my personal ghost story that I shared with you recently. I really like sharing it with you all. And I think that in the coming weeks, I'm going to share another story of a personal nature with you. And I hope you enjoy that one too. But for now, sit back and enjoy the show. Story 1, Icy. My friend Jennifer told me she had seen a ghost in her house, and honestly, I didn't believe her until one night when I spent the night with her. I was lying next to her in bed when all of a sudden I got the coldest feeling. Even though it was summer, their air conditioner was broken and the house was rather warm, or it should have been, but I was ice cold. I turned over to face the wall, and out of the corner of my right eye, I saw a figure right before my head hit the pillow. I cocked my head to one side, and it was still there. It was a woman, maybe 20 years old, with long, beautiful blonde hair and bright, icy blue eyes. Hence her nickname. Well, that. And her habit of making the room really icy cold. Her dress was once white, but it had turned a sickly blue-green, like she had drowned and her dress had collected algae. Even her skin had a blue tinge to it. This freaked me out real bad. The next morning I told Jennifer about it. She hadn't told me yet what her ghost looked like, and when I told her what I'd seen, her jaw dropped, and she said, "Yeah, that's her." For the next 2 years, I dreamed about Icy every night. We pieced together the story of her death based upon each of our dreams. On December 14th, 1985, her school held a dance. Her and her boyfriend had gotten bored, so they drove up to the point. It overlooked the lake. She decided then that it was the right time to tell her that she was pregnant, but she didn't know if the baby was his. See, her uncle had raped her, and she thought that the baby she was carrying might be his instead. But before she could say anything, a dark figure knocked her boyfriend out cold with the butt of an axe. She tried to scream for help. She jumped out of the car and started to run, but the figure hacked her up with the axe 42 times. He then tied her body to a rock and dropped her into the lake. I only discovered this part because I went up to this town, and I recognized that same lookout point because it's only about a mile from my dad's cabin. While out rafting one day, I saw a rock with a chain at the bottom of the lake. I only dream about Icy sometimes, but I think that one of our friends might be Icy reincarnated. She looks just like her, except for the blue eyes. Her birthday is the same day that Icy passed away. And Icy, she's related to Jennifer. She's actually Jennifer's great aunt. Story 2, Haunted University. I had just completed my courses for my law degree, but had to pass my graduate exams. I had been an assistant professor at my university. I had gotten special permission to use the premises after normal hours, including weekends and holidays. On weekends, my study partner and myself would always have the company of other students cramming for one exam or another, but mostly med students. The regulars had special permits also. They were studying for medical boards and a few pre-meds. They were still more interested in the party scene than studying, so they would spend their weekends trying to catch up for Monday's quiz. The day my story happens is November 1st, All Saints' Day in my country. There's a special dish to eat on this day, besides the visits to the cemeteries, etc., for this holiday. I had about 80 finals to grade, and had rented 4 movies, but I was way behind on my scheduled study program. I decided to be wiser to go to school, so I had no distractions, and grade the finals, and catch up on my studying, and grab a burger, since I didn't have the traditional dish to eat. Once I got to school, the security officer told me that no one had come in, and that I had the school pretty much to myself. I installed myself in my normal classroom and went to work. Occasionally I would hear footsteps coming towards my classroom. I would look up. The doors are red, with little square windows in the middle. I could see no one. The steps would always fall short of my door. During the morning, I did step outside to use the restroom, smoke a cigarette, and to check and see if anyone else was around. It was already around 1 p.m., and I was still alone. Like I said, I would hear footsteps. So I just finished the last exam. My watch read 1:15 p.m., and out of the blue I hear this huge crash and a piercing scream of pain. My first instinct was to run out, which I did, and go check the architecture drawing room. The regulars were all in the bad habit of being overcome with tiredness or sleep, and we go into the drawing room, pull the drawing tables down into a flat position, and climb on top of them, and take a nap, as the floors were way too cold for that. My thoughts were that someone had fallen from one of these drawing tables and had gotten hurt. I ran in, and I flipped the lights on, and nothing. By then I got this horrible feeling. I fled back into my classroom and grabbed up my things, ran upstairs to my car. We had roof parking. I pulled out of that school as fast as I could. The eerie part is that once at home, it hit me. A couple of months before, my friend and I had arrived at school on a Sunday, and our classroom was a total mess. Knowing it had been two of the pre-med regulars, we barged in on them in the next classroom and bickered at them over the mess they had made. They apologized, but they told us that something had happened to them in the night. They had been studying in their classroom. One of them had been dozing off when they heard a loud crash and a piercing scream. Thinking that it had been a security officer that had fallen from the 6th floor, they ran out and looked over the balconies. At the same time, the security officers came running downstairs, thinking that one of them had been goofing off and had fallen. They searched all over the whole building and found nothing. It was also known that the elevator in the second building moves on its own and opens and closes all the time. There has also been a sighting of an old man walking on the 2nd floor of the first building, and, when pursued, will appear on the 6th floor of the second building. The door will fly open on the 6th floor during the night. Needless to say, I never went back alone to study on a holiday. Story 3. Shenanigans. I never met either of my grandparents, but I think I might have seen one after he had passed. One night, I was in my living room, watching television. My mom was in her room lying down, because she has some really bad back problems and is in pain most of the time. I had to put my hair up, so I went down the hall to the bathroom to grab a hair elastic. I noticed my mom's light was off, so I went in to shut her door, so as not to disturb her. As I reached for the doorknob, I noticed a white figure, the lower corner of her bed. As soon as I made eye contact with the man, he stood up from the bed, turned, and walked towards the closet, and just vanished. I was never afraid or scared, but I was very curious. The next day I came home from school, and I saw my mother putting up new pictures in our hallway. One of the pictures was of my grandfather in a white or khaki-colored shirt and pants set, and I became even more convinced that the man I saw in her room was him, just watching over my mother, his little girl, seeing how she was doing. Story 4. My life. All my life, I have been moved from one house to the next. Well, ever since I was young. And I could hear voices in some of those places that I've lived in. But no matter what, no one would listen to me about it. Finally, when I moved out of my mother's house and got married, my wife started to believe me. She saw me be attacked, and she's heard some of the voices. The first time she saw something, we lived in a small 2-bedroom house. I was fixing dinner and was hit 2 times, once with a AA battery and the second time with a big solid metal earring. And that's when she started to believe me. Then we moved into a farmhouse that was well over 100 years old. This was just before the big ice storm of '98. My wife and children were sitting in our living room when I heard at least 4 or 5 voices chatting back and forth. I turned to my wife and asked her if she heard anything, and she said yes. I felt a huge relief. Then the ice storm came, and I sent my wife to go stay with her sister, and that's when the house got really strange. The voices that we both heard started addressing me by name. The night before my wife and kids got home, one voice told me to look for it. Still to this day, I don't know what it is or why I hear these voices, But I walk into a haunted house and I just know if there's something there and who they are. Thankfully, the spirits in our home have stopped pelting me with things while I'm cooking, although they still move things around and make their presence known to my wife on occasion. But at least my wife believes me now.